Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is TB Sky and I've still got a cough in my throat, but we are going to be following up on my video from yesterday, which there will be a link to down in the description, where I broke down and went through and analyzed the two comics that follow the VARUS lore update. Today we're going to be looking at another part of the massive lore update that came out. We're going to be looking at the music video, and then perhaps either later today or tomorrow I'm going to go through the lore itself and perhaps put together a bit of a video talking about some of the aspects of that I'm interested in. Now, before we get started, first of all, there's not going to be any of the music from the music video in this video because content ID is a bitch and I don't want to have to deal with it. And also, I'm not really interested in the music so much as I'm interested in the animation and the visual storytelling and how all of that works. So that's what we're going to be talking about. I also need to acknowledge that I am not a 3D animation expert. I know quite a bit about 2D animation. I know a lot about the techniques and the methods that is used to achieve a lot of different effects and looks in that medium. I don't know quite as much about 3D animation, so if you were looking for breakdowns of how do they do those smoke effects or what programs that they use, unfortunately I can't help you there. But what we're going to be talking about is some of the filmmaking, because there's some very interesting visual metaphors and visual filmmaking going on here in terms of how they're telling the story, how they're communicating what's going on, and also a few interesting things about the general League of Legends aesthetic and how they're presenting it. Now, for those who don't know, the general story of VARUS now is that these two guys are lovers, and they were defending this temple from a bunch of Noxians, and Val here saw his lover Kai, who's got a bunch of arrows sticking out of him, getting pretty much murdered, like he's pretty much dying, and decided, let's go into the temple, let's jump into this magic well, because I've heard there's some magic in there, and turns out there's a evil demon-possessed bow down there that consumes them both. They become spirits hosted in the body of VARUS as he treks a vengeful journey across Runeterra, and now the primary conflict of VARUS' story, the primary conflict of his character, is a question of, can these two guys and their mutual love for each other overcome the relentless drive for hatred and vengeance and destruction that VARUS, the bow, the Darkin, embodies, right? So, what this short film primarily is about, what it's primarily about showing, is the process of converting from being two dudes who are in love and who jump into a well into a demon-possessed hellbowman who wants to kill and murder everybody. So what we're dealing with is not so much a story that is told in literal terms as a story that is told in almost surrealist, expressionist terms, and you can already see it happening here with these smoky hands symbolizing VARUS literally trying to tear them apart from each other because he understands that together they can resist his power. And the whole framework of the animation short here is very much a story of how do those two guys find each other again while they are imprisoned within the hellscape of VARUS' imagination. You can see what they're doing. I mean, aside from the visual metaphors where VARUS' arrow literally shatters them, right? It literally tears them apart. These are arrows from VARUS' bow. They're literally tearing these two guys apart. They're preventing them from reaching each other. The vengeance is a barrier to their love. It's not very subtle. It's a very literal metaphor. But there's also, look at this interesting transition here, right? So one of the arrows that has just shot his arm off, Star Wars style, is boom, it punches a hole in his head, and so the camera transitions into the head, so we understand, oh, when we look at this scene, we instinctively understand, okay, we're looking at something that happens in his head, in his mind. And what's the thing that's dominating his head right now? Well, the Noxians. The Noxians who hurt his lover, and he's killing them right here. So that's setting up the emotional aspect that he very much wants revenge. He wants revenge for him. And we can see here the shattering, and then we enter his head. This is his side of the story. This is what's in his head. And where Val's mindscape is dominated by the conflict, by the I want to kill these fucking Noxians because they took away my Heartlight, who is this guy. His head is much more dominated by this nature scene, this placidness. And that contrast is very interesting because, as you remember, here, what we have is this disjointed, broken mess of a place, right? Everything is shattered. Everything is torn apart. His world is literally shattered. It is literally torn apart. It's dominated by rock, which is cold and hard and unfeeling, and there's violence, and there's darkness. So that's how Val is doing. So we look into Kai's world, and it's a very different place. It is not shattered. It is not torn apart. Everything is very whole. It's even, you see the roundness, the curvature, as though there are hills suggesting a perfect circle, right? It's all about cohesiveness, being together, existing in a harmony, existing in... Like, the golden light that's going on here is a visual signifier that you'll often see. It's almost sepia-toned, right? Like an old photograph. It's a memory of love, of a beautiful time, of togetherness, of being whole, of being at one with the world, and having solid ground to stand on. There are no shattered platforms here. There's nothing to fall off of. There's just solid, safe ground everywhere. No hills to roll down. And you can see that contrast illustrated extremely starkly right here, illustrating the conflict between the two lovers, which is that Val really fucking wants his revenge. Like, he really wants revenge for what the Noxians did to his lover. But if he does this, he tears them apart. And there's, of course, just to complete the visual metaphor, those heads that were shattered are still here, right here. But you can see that they have actually reached each other. So the visual metaphors going on here are quite excellent. So what Varus does is he saves him. That's the bargain, right? The bargain is, if I give you my soul, my body, my consciousness, and I let you possess me, you will save my lover. So Varus is about to pull the arrow out, signifying saving his life. But he doesn't want that. That's also kind of an important part, is that Kai is resisting this. He doesn't want it. You can see here setting up the conflict between Kai and Varus in particular, as Val powerlessly attempts to prevent it. Now, this scene is mostly about setting up the concept that they are being merged together as one entity, as Varus takes one lover and literally fires him into the chest of the other. And there's not as many interesting visual metaphors going on here, but this bit of visual trickery, like this bit of animation, that flowing, it's a replication of the panel in one of the comics if you watched the video yesterday. But this flowing together effect is just, it's surreal, it's gorgeous. I really love how they pulled it off. Again, I can't speak to the animation techniques used to do it, but it looks damn pretty. So, back to the real world. And how do we know it's the real world? Well, take a look at what the world here looks like. Take a look at the light and the way that the world, everything here is kind of frayed, falling apart, dusty. And so what tells us that we're back in the real world is, oh, nothing here is frayed, the light is natural, the textures are natural, we even get a camera effect, like this little blurring, as though the camera is very close to the ground, as though it's a real camera and not a bit of 3D animation. So the camera tries very hard to mimic the effects and how would an actual camera perhaps behave when it was trying to deal with this stuff, in order to tell us, okay, we're back in the real world, this is the real Varus, who's about to do his real thing. And there is this parting animation shot, which is just a bit of badassery showing off, as Varus fires the arrow and boom, identifies himself. So this is a wonderfully short video. Usually my animation breakdowns on these things go a lot longer, but that's because I spend a lot more time going frame by frame on each individual piece in order to just break down how they did the movement. But the movement and the animation itself really isn't that interesting in this one. What's more interesting is the visual metaphors that are being used to tell the story. Now, there's also a thing of... I have to say that the character designs of these two characters, Val and Kai, are not very interesting. Like, they are kind of bland. They just look like handsome dudes. And they're not... In a game like League of Legends, where there are so many highly distinctive, very varied and interesting character designs, these two guys are a little bit boring, I have to say. Like, you could do more stuff, even if they're just, excuse me, two ordinary humans. You could do a little bit more to visually differentiate them, to make them more sort of interesting to make to play up the idea, because something that's also explored a little bit in the comic and the other media is that Kai and Val are very much complementary characters. They have very different character traits. One of them is, like, it's a classic double act. One of them is sort of impulsive and a little bit more aggressive. The other guy is much more of a placid, calm, chilled out, I'm at peace with the world, disciplined guy, right? That's the dynamic that they've got, and that could be expressed a little bit more when it comes to showing off the character designs, but it's fine. I mean, they just have to look kind of adorable. I just wish they were a little more interesting, because they just seem a little too normal for League of Legends, basically. Like, in a game like that where everyone is just like a freaking freak, it's a little weird to have these two extremely normal looking dudes who look like they're just like extras in someone's D&D campaign. It's like, yeah, but that's a minor quibble, really. I do love the way that the camera is used in this whole thing, because what we've got here is we have this action scene, essentially, where we have an explosion and then guys are falling through the air and there's arrows flying after them, they're rotating, they're reaching out for each other, boom, dynamic shit happening, rah, rah, rah. And then the rotational motion of the camera never stops, but it is used to transition us into this. And now all the action stops, everything stops. We're looking pretty much at a painting rather than a scene in action, which is one of the other ways that the visuals tell us that we're transitioning from the characters having a literal experience into looking at their mindscapes, looking at how they're feeling inside. This is more like looking at a snapshot, a painting, a state of mind, rather. Which is why everything seems so still and so placid, and why everything becomes so surreal. And the same thing goes for when we see here. Like, there's not really much wind going on. There's nothing moving the wheat field, and the buck in the background, the animal doesn't move and the trees don't move. So it's like paintings that we're looking at. They don't start moving until we zoom in and the characters become aware of where they are. And there's just some darn good filmmaking going on here. Now, I do think on the whole, and this is part of, because the character designs are a little bit indistinct, like they're a little bit generic and boring, sometimes it becomes a little bit unclear exactly what the dynamic is, exactly what story it's trying to tell. And this sequence in particular, where, like, I think it's a clever idea to have him pull the arrow out of Kai and fire it into Val, but it's not really super clear what the mechanism is by which Varus fuses the two people together in order to create himself a new body. Like, I think they could have gone a little bit, they could have explored that a little bit more, gotten a little bit more literal with it, but because it's a music video, you only have so many minutes and seconds. This one is only 3 minutes long, so I suppose you just have to be economical with your time. Anyway, I think that's about as many nitpicks as I really need for this video. Varus looks like an absolute badass. Although I do have my criticisms of his character design in general as well, but you know, it's a well-crafted music video. The track is a bit of a banger, and yeah, League of Legends teams are fantastic at doing these short animations, and I'm glad we've been seeing a few more of them this year than we've had. We've had the World's music video. We've had this one. We also had a couple of the other animation videos that I have broken down at other times on this channel. You can go and find them if you were so inclined. But I guess I really have to end this video. I keep looking for more stuff to say, but there really isn't much. So my name has been TV Sky. If you have any comments, questions, you can leave them down in the comments down below. If you leave a comment, I will try to read it. I will read it, actually. And if I have something interesting or useful to say in response, I will respond. You can leave a like if you're inclined. You can leave a dislike if you think I'm full of shit, which is fine. Subscribe if you want, and I suppose I shall simply see you in the next video.